Commissioner Rogers on Zoom?
We do not yet, Madam Chair.
Okay, he'll join us when he does.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and board members. Marnie Kyle, Director of Health and Human Services. And I thought that you probably are getting a little weary of hearing from me nonstop. And I'm bright enough to know that sometimes it's great to have a fabulous colleague and a new face. So Kristen is here to provide some information about the community counseling program that we are starting. And I will say this was pretty much all Kristen's brainchild. She's got lots of great ideas, and I thought this is something that really would be needed from our community, and she took the ball and ran with it with all the partners in the community. I think it's a really exciting program to share with you today. And I'm going to step back, even though we're probably 6 feet, just to give her plenty of physical distance and space. Oh, sorry, one more thing. When Kristen is done, also Sia Lindstrom also has an update for you.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington, Commissioners. So I'm pleased to present some information on our new COVID community counseling program that we actually just launched it last week, but it was a very, very soft launch because we wanted to allow time to work out some kinks around referral processes and that sort of thing. So we're working this week on a media launch, so you'll be hearing more about it here soon, and from me right now. So the COVID Community Counseling Program, this is really a program that is designed to help build resilience, build coping skills, and really supporting our community in the wake of this pandemic. The idea behind this program is really to help bolster our community and provide support so that they can get through this. The idea is to get in front of it as much as possible and build skills within the community so that they can manage things like depressive symptoms, anxiety, just struggling with coping with this pandemic. It's based on a model that's out of FEMA called Crisis Counseling Program. That's a program that is really designed to be short-term. The idea, again, is to provide immediate support in the wake of a disaster or large-scale community event. And the idea is really to move into recovery as quick as possible for our community. Part of what we felt was going to be really important is to also add a component where we would be screening for suicidal ideation and increased in substance use. We know that that is a particular area of concern for our community members. We've been monitoring suicidal attempt rates and wanting to make sure that we're also providing supports to hopefully mitigate any additional increase, although we haven't seen any at this point, to hopefully prevent any increase in suicide in our community. The other thing about this program is that we want to use it as a way to identify people who could use longer-term supports and refer them and help connect them into services as needed. So that's a key component of the program as well. And then finally, it was really important to us to make sure that this program was going to be available in multiple languages. And so I'll show you later about who our partners are and what languages we have capacity for this program. So I do want to talk about what it isn't, because I want to make sure that there isn't confusion. This isn't your typical mental health services that behavioral health services provides. It's not therapy. When people enter this program, they're not going to go through a diagnostic assessment, get a treatment plan, and then start working on a kind of a protocol or a strict treatment for addressing an issue. This is much more supportive counseling. It's about really identifying what are the supports that will help a person get through, what are some of the practical advice, practical resources that can be made available for a person. So we don't diagnose, we don't develop treatment plans, and it's not a long-term intervention. It's really intended to be anywhere from 1 to maybe 5 sessions. Some people will ask for more. We're happy to provide more. And then if we're seeing that individuals are still asking for more, at that point we're going to assess about whether they really could benefit from longer-term treatment and help connect them to that service. So why the program is needed, I put this graph up in here because this is from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Service Administration, SAMHSA. They work in close partnership with FEMA in terms of large-scale disaster response. But I think that this illustration is great at kind of showing why a program like this is so important. What it shows is the bar on the left-hand side, the emotional highs and emotional lows. That's really kind of the state that our community goes through as they're going through a disaster event. So you can see that when the event hits, the impact, there's actually a rallying of the community. People really respond, and you see the best of people. So they really come together and do what it takes to respond to whatever's going on to the community. But that can only last for so long. And then after a while, as the event continues, you start seeing people fall into emotional lows. They just can't sustain that high for a long period of time. And that's when you start seeing people having more depression, more anxiety, more difficulty coping in their daily lives, just kind of struggling. So that's what we want to respond to. You'll see that we eventually work towards reconstruction, getting back to normal. This event is prolonged, and so we really want to try and get this program going as soon as possible so that we can move towards recovery and reconstruction as quick as possible. I realize this is a little hard to read. I apologize. I made it as big as I could, but the slide's only so big. But I really wanted to show this because I think that it really helps underscore the timeline of why it's important to launch this program now. And this is really what we use to help inform the development of this program. So this is from the Washington State Department of Health. They put out a really nice report that did some analysis about projected numbers, what percentage of the population could be impacted by the COVID pandemic, and then what's the likely course that we would see in terms of the emotional impact to our community. So the part that we're concerned about, we're kind of in that June 3-month period where you might see increasing hopelessness, increasing substance use, that sort of thing. We're really getting concerned as we go, and we will start seeing more depression symptoms. We'll start seeing more suicidal ideation likely in our community. So we want to get in front of that as quick as possible by offering supports to our community. And then the thing I liked about this graph too is that it also overlaid that when we start hitting the winter, we're going to be challenged because holidays are already challenging for a lot of people, and seasonal affective disorder also becomes a factor. And so it just helps us understand that this is an intervention that will need to go for quite a few months and be available. So our process for how the services will be delivered, we have set up a triage through County Behavioral Health. So we have both a dedicated email as well as a phone number that people can call us. What we will do is we'll do a quick screening and then refer them to one of our partners, who I'll talk about here in a minute. Really the goal about having it triaged through our program is that we can monitor the demand, we can add additional providers or services if necessary, and then we can also help if one provider is getting a lot of referrals and needs to slow down on referrals, we can then refer more to other providers. So it just allows us to kind of manage the referrals and make sure that people's wait for the services are as limited as possible. One of the things I should say is we do have a large culturally specific kind of component to this program. And one of the things we wanted to do is make sure that people can contact those providers directly. They don't need to go through us. They can contact the providers and receive a response in their native language and really hopefully in a much more culturally responsive way. Initially, our plan is to provide most of the support through phone and video options. I have talked with the providers, and as able, we will open that up to more in-person supports. It'll be really dependent on kind of how we go through our own phases here at the county, and as the providers are able to see people face-to-face in person. The idea is that we want eventually to have phone, video, and face-to-face supports because some people will want the face-to-face, some people will be just fine with video. So we want to have lots of options. So our partners, LifeWorks Northwest, Western Psychological, those are two of our large, comprehensive community behavioral health agencies in Washington County. We've had long-standing partnerships with them. We already have existing contracts with them in place, so they've stepped up and said they really want to be part of it. One of the really great things about both LifeWorks and Western is we recently started piloting an online supportive platform with them where people can go through a self-guided therapy for anxiety and depression. We've just rolled that out right before this all started, and so it's actually a really nice complement to this service. So LifeWorks and Western were both very excited to add this component and really tap into that new service that just recently became available. The other thing that's great about both of those organizations is they offer services in both English and in Spanish. And LifeWorks Northwest has a really nice partnership with Virginia Garcia. And so while Virginia Garcia is not listed on here, LifeWorks is going to be supplying clinicians in the Virginia Garcia clinics to also really hopefully engage with our Latinx community and provide support to them. In addition, we partnered with Asian Health and Service Center and Lutheran Community Services. They're both culturally specific organizations and provide services with clinicians who are of those languages and cultures. So they were very excited. With those two organizations, clients can reach out to them directly. And then they will also do a lot of in-reach into the communities. They're well connected into various places where community members gather, and so they'll be reaching into there and trying to connect with people. So in terms of who's eligible, basically if you live in Washington County, you're eligible. We are trying to make this as low barrier as possible, so there's no income requirements, no age requirements, no insurance requirements. We basically, if somebody identifies that they are struggling and would like some additional support, we'll offer it to them. So again, trying to make it as low barrier as possible because we really want people to engage in this program as much as possible. And then finally, I wanted to mention about the demand. This is an interesting program in that we don't really know how many people are going to engage in this program. We aren't really sure about what the demand is going to be. We've looked at estimates, we've looked at information from FEMA, we've looked at information from that Washington State report. Our best guess is that 50% of the population will have some impact, but only a portion of those will actually reach out and engage in some supportive activities. So our goal is to make it as broad as possible, make it as welcoming and responsive as possible, and then just if the demand is exceeding our capacity, we've talked with the providers about adding additional staffing. And we've talked with other providers that are already on our network about being kind of on standby, and they'd be happy to step up and also provide this service as well. So we think that we can expand and contract as necessary or as demand requires. And then in terms of communication and marketing, we are like I said, we did a soft approach or soft opening last week. Haven't had very many referrals. Basically, at that point, we just did some social media posts. We let our crisis line and crisis team know about the service and built bridges so that they could easily refer. And so that was really our goal. One of the things I should say is that this program, we want it to be an alternative to the crisis team because we want the crisis team to still be available to respond to people who are in acute crisis, but have something available for people who are not in quite as acute crisis, but could definitely use support. We will be, this says that we're doing broad communication on 6/1. That didn't happen because I wrote this before I knew that we were opening on 6/1. And so we're going to do a media release within a day or so. And that's where we'll really encourage the community to connect with us. And funding, this has been an interesting one. I think the maximum cost would be about $2 million based on my estimates. I think it'll come in probably significantly less than that, but I wanted to make sure that we had a lot of capacity in case the demand really was a lot more than we expected. I am currently working with Oregon Health Authority to submit information for a FEMA grant under their crisis counseling program, and so that's due on Friday, so I'll be partnering with Oregon Health Authority. So that's, I'm pretty hopeful that that will cover a large portion of this. If not, I'll be advocating for CARES to cover a portion of it, and if that isn't available as well, then I can dip into some of the reserves that we have in the behavioral health program. So I wanted to assure that even though we're not clear about the demand or, we do have the capacity to cover it if necessary. So that's basically all I have. Do you have any questions?
Commissioners?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Rogers is now on Zoom for you.
Yep, we'll do around the room first.
Sounds like a great program. So, yeah, thanks for the update on this. This is very cool.
Thank you.
I don't have any questions. One of the questions I had was funding, and you covered that at the end, so thank you for that. I just can't imagine that this isn't a big issue. And so I appreciate the forward thinking, and I appreciate the fact that this is in play, will be in place, so thank you.
Well timed, thank you.
Commissioner Rogers, do you have any questions or comments?
No, the only question I had had to do with the funding, and you answered that as well. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you
Keep
very
up the
much.
good work, and I understand that Sia Lindstrom has something as well.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. This is Sia Lindstrom with the County Administrative Office. Just briefly, I fielded a couple of questions about our boards, commissions, and CPO meetings as we've entered phase 1. And so the suggestion was that I tag on to the end of Marnie's COVID update so that you all could get a brief update on how our boards, commissions, and CPO meetings are going on day 2 of our phase 1 reentry. So as a reminder, we started to close down our non-essential services in mid-March as the governor issued a series of orders that culminated in her Stay Home, Save Lives order. And this included meetings of our boards, commissions, and CPOs. And in May, as we learned how to use our virtual space a little more effectively, we started bringing those meetings back. And specifically, starting May 1st, we allowed our boards, commissions, and CPOs to meet virtually. So it allowed us to ease into those meetings and help people get used to the virtual platform. So right now, where we are in June, our boards and commissions are meeting either totally virtually right now or a hybrid of virtual and in-person. Many of them are making use of the technology and support in this room. And again, I think IT and folks in our office, and especially community engagement, have been really helpful with that. About a half a dozen of them met in May, and about a dozen of them are scheduled so far in June. So we'll see whether more of them get scheduled here. We have 28 boards and commissions, just to give you relative scope, and about a dozen of those are standing themselves up in June. For our CPOs, I think you know that we had one brave CPO meet for the first time in May using a virtual platform, and several more are scheduled in June. So the CCI steering committee also met virtually, and the CCI as a whole is planning to meet this next month as well. For the CPO leadership, providing in-person space is a bigger concern for them, and so many are kind of trying to work out how to provide community meeting space, and our community engagement team is doing a really good job of providing technical support to them. They've got to figure out how to find meeting space that is both technologically able to support the Zoom work and big enough to support the social distancing requirements, both. And please know that just a reminder that the guidance from the county is that we want our community meetings to be 25 or less. So they are working to balance that as they stand up their CPO meetings. So we'll see how CPO leaders feel comfortable rolling that out here over the next month or two. And that's my very brief update as they start to stand up this very important function for the county here as we reopen. Any questions for me on this? Okay, good. Thanks, you all.
Thank you. And now we get to move on to things other than COVID. So the next item on our agenda is the County Transit Committee appointments and bylaws. Chris Steffenbach. You'll need to move the mic closer to you the way these mics work. There, now it's on.
Okay, well, happy to be here at this point and keeping this project moving forward. And I'm here today to review again the county's role in the 3-county public transportation improvement plan and submitting our request to TriMet and the Oregon Transportation Committee for the funding that was been available through HB 2017 called Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund. So we are now entering the start of the planning for our second biennium, having submitted the first plan in 2018. And back in 2018, it was a super short timeline because HB 2017 had just been adopted and the rules were being developed and we were submitting plans. And but we pulled that together, and in 2018, the board appointed a committee to advise on the recommendations that were submitted. And the scope of the work is really to serve the county areas outside of the TriMet and SMART districts, to make those connections in between the areas outside and within. And then also included is a chunk of the TriMet funds dedicated for these regional coordination services, which we call shuttle or last mile. So since we submitted the plan in 2018, we entered an IGA with TriMet. You've approved contracts with Ride Connection, and we've really begun to move forward with implementing those services. And we're ready to do an expansion, and COVID hit. So things are on hold a little bit now, as you can imagine. But sort of after our first experience for that first year, we have the time now to think a little more carefully about the committee and the bylaws and the structure. And so what we have in your packet now are draft bylaws to give a little more structure to this committee. And I have a short PowerPoint to go over that. And then also to get input on a list of nominees for appointment to the Transit Committee. And on Friday, you received an updated memo with more information on that as we were pulling together some additional contacts with folks. So the goal for today is to get your input on the bylaws and the committee nominees, and then bring it all back to you for action on June 23rd. So, so I was going to start with the PowerPoint, and yeah, just again, the committee purpose, as this next few slides are just going to summarize what's in the bylaws, is to advise you on the priorities for funding using the funds of the Statewide Transportation Improvement Fund for those areas outside of the TriMet SMART District and for those regional coordination services within the district. And then
Next slide.
Yeah, next slide. So a little bit more on the committee operations. So just to be clear, we are proposing that the board advise, that the committee advise the board on transit project priorities. And I want to say what a project is. A project, that's a term that we use with the ODOT process. It means anything. It can mean purchasing vehicles, services, marketing, a bus stop. So it's the whole gambit. And like most committees, we're proposing a census-based approach. and to be with public meetings, public notice, and meeting summaries. So it would all be standard in that sense. Plus the ability to create subcommittees, because there's a few topics that require a little deeper dive. We've proposed for the committee members, we were here way back in January, talking to you about the upcoming STIF process, and at that time, the consolidation with the Special Transportation Fund for older adults and persons with disabilities. And we talked about really working to get more input from transit riders and older adults with persons with disabilities, as well as making sure we continue our work with low-income households, historically marginalized communities, and continue that perspective of the public transportation needs, both outside the TriMet district and those last mile needs within the district. We're proposing, as in the bylaws, that we have a board representative, which I've talked to the chair about this in the past. We just want to confirm that's how you're going to go. And then what we did last time, we had a mayor or their designated alternate from the 3 cities in the rural area, Banks, Gaston, and North Plains, plus representative from our own supervisor for Division of Aging Veteran Services. So that's what we're proposing again. So there's 5 sort of positions, and then there's opening for a minimum of 2 or more to reflect that diversity in demographics and transit perspectives. So next slide. So yeah, okay, so why don't you go back one. Before we talk about the process and schedule, I'd like to take a pause and see if there are questions about the bylaws before we go into the committee nominees, unless you want me to just move forward.
No, Chris, just reading through the bylaws, I didn't see where it would allow for Zoom meetings, someone to be present.
Oh, that's a good point.
It just talks about those present can vote, and just
right.
So if we could include in that where you can be virtually present.
Good. We might not have thought of that a few months ago.
Yeah, that's a little more important now.
One thing go ahead.
I think we already have some standard language with most of our committees in terms of committees meeting in person and through electronic means. So we don't have to identify all the electronic means, or at least I've seen that over the last 16 plus months.
Right. One point that I raised specifically for some input when the supplemental information about the committee members is contacting folks and seeing who's interested, and the fact that this application goes in every 2 years. A term limit of only 2 years seemed a little short. It seemed like it might be useful to have a term of 4 years so that you could get that history to continue with biennium, over 2 biennium. So that was one question I wanted to get your input on. It just seemed like it might make some sense to go with 4-year terms and maybe 2 consecutive terms, but it's either way.
Well, I had a question on the member responsibilities and terms. Item 2, appointed members will serve a 2-year term and may be reappointed to 3 successive terms. So this is suggesting a person can serve up to 8 years.
Yeah. So I could go either way. I'm just thinking about it, putting this together, is that there might be some benefit in having that going from over 2 bienniums.
Possibly, but at the same time, this makes sure that if we lose people along the way, we have it practiced in.
Right, and we'll probably be, mayors change as well, so we might be back doing reappointments anyway.
Yeah, but I think your point's valid in that now this group meets every 2 years. Is that what I heard?
Yeah, we'd be nice to meet in the off years so we can monitor performance and just do a report out. And I think as we get more experience, we could meet in an off year as well.
Well, I was just thinking more of the continuity of 4-year terms versus 2-year terms, of, I guess, consistency amongst that group. So you can do 2 4s or, like this, 4 2s, but I would I would suggest 2 4s.
Well, the meeting schedule is also ad hoc, too. Whereas that doesn't say that it's at a regular time frame. So, I mean, it's not that it has to say, but I think with regard to someone thinking, well, I'm signing up for 4 years, but it's 4 years based on, it could just be 2 meetings a year. And so I think it would be beneficial to see across our departments, do we have any other committees that deal with the biennial, and what is the general model? So it
Yeah,
seems like we're
yeah.
getting very into the
Right.
details.
So just a question. So if we want to move on, if there are no other comments on the bylaws, then let's move on to.
I just have one
uh-huh.
brief one, without wordsmithing here too much or getting into the weeds, but I think it would be helpful for a number of folks to understand what the, what is the state biennial budget schedule?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not even quite sure I know what that is, and it would be helpful for people to know what that is. So perhaps just following that phrase to just say, which is typically such and such time.
Okay. That's easy. Okay. So if we want to move on to the candidates, first I want to.
Can I ask
Uh-huh.
another question? Did the, 2 questions, did this get any eyes on from our community engagement folks?
Yes.
Okay, great. And then the other is, you talked earlier about all of this would be adopted by the board maybe on the 23rd or so. If there are some improvements to be made in the bylaws, does that come back to the board, or just can the committee update its own bylaws?
This is written for you all to approve the bylaws.
Okay, just wanted to make it
Yeah.
clear.
So in terms of the candidates, first I want to thank Amanda Garcia Snell and Rebecca Miller for reaching out to the Civic Leaders Group to see if there's interest in participating, as well as the various committees dealing with older adults and persons with disability as well. And that was a huge help. So if you look now at the supplemental information that went out on this table, we have the board representative, and mayors are the designees from the 3 cities, Banks, Gaston, and North Plains. And I have heard back that Pete Edison is willing to do it, and I've been trading calls at Gaston and North Plains. And Mayor Lanahan was there in 2018 as well, so that's a change.
I mentioned this to Mayor Lanahan in my conversation with her yesterday, and I believe she is willing to do
They
that.
were happy to participate last time. Thanks. And then Rebecca Miller from our own HHS. So then in terms of the folks that responded with interest, we have Anna Deanna Johnson. She's a transit writer. She represents the needs of older adults and persons with disabilities, and she's very engaged on several of TriMet's committees, including the Committee on Accessible Transportation, the Special Transportation Fund Advisory Committee, which is the one that distributes funds for older adults and persons with disabilities, and TriMet's Transit Equity Committee. Elaine Wells also said she'd really like to be on the committee. I think many of you may know her. She has experienced public transportation professional, starting her career in Washington County, working with Community Action in their first transit. She went on to become the executive director of Ride Connection and is now board chair of a national committee that advises small transit agencies. And she's also on our own advisory council on aging and disability. We have Mahesh Udada, who also expressed interest in participating. He is one of the county's civic leader graduates, and professionally, he works in global logistics. So it's kind of like transit supply and demand, only a bigger picture. And He volunteers on many organizations locally and has transit experience from Mumbai, India, which will bring another different perspective. We also have interest to participate from Marianne Potter, who is the finance director with Centro Cultural, and she brings a deep understanding of the clients who visit Centro Cultural and their transportation needs. Previously, we had Juan Carlos Gonzalez from Centro Cultural on this committee, and that connection to Centro Cultural turns out to be very useful. We also have Deanna Palm, who also would be excited to be a member of the committee again. She fills a gap in that in experience with the last mile and the connections, the transportation needs of employers. She's also co-chair of TriMet's Transit Advisory Committee, where these recommendations go to, and also served on TriMet's subcommittee for the regional coordination, which allocates the funding for the regional coordination services.
I have a quick question on just name check here. On my phone directory, I have an E at the end of her name.
Okay.
Is it spelled P-A-L-M-E?
No.
Just, there's no E. Okay.
Okay, good.
So I will correct mine.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay. So in addition, we did this before, so I guess I should say 2018. We invited representatives from TriMet, SMART, and Ride Connection to be ex officio members because they really bring that on-the-ground experience, and it's all about coordinating services. So this is our proposed list nominees. I have to say, personally, I'm really happy that we had response from people that we reached out to. And so, again, I just want to pause before I move on to the process and schedule slides to see if you have any other comments, questions.
So how many people was on your list?
Shall I count them? I think is there 10 or 11? 10, right? 10.
Okay. Thank you.
No comments? Okay, great.
Rod,
I have a comment. I just have a question. I want to unmute. Chris, this committee obviously is going to be involved a lot in the 2017 probably process as well, and I suspect it has to do with questions regarding the length of term. It's not just we think of the rural western part of the county. I mean, it's anything that's not in the TriMet district, so it's a fairly broad area. My question is the frequency of their meetings. It seems like once a year is probably not going to be adequate as these things start to change and evolve. So that's my number one. And my number two is back to the question. I didn't have it at the time, but I just wanted to hear your presentation. Shouldn't it be something different in terms of appointment? I understand the mayors are going to turn. I understand other people are going to turn, but I think this will be robust. We know that Clackamas County has a number of these transit districts. And I remember at the time when I first was getting on that 2017 committee, which wasn't that long ago, I said, maybe we ought to get ROR because there's allocated funds if you're a transit district. So I'm glad to see we're doing it. So I that's kind of rambling, a whole bunch of things, and I haven't had a chance to talk to you about it. But tell me why it's so infrequent, number one, meetings. Two, shouldn't there be longer terms? Because that would make some sense if there are going to be infrequency. And then can you give a baseline for the funds that are apt to flow into that committee so people might have an opportunity to understand that? Thanks.
So the frequency, we think that last time around, at least, we were able to review the project priorities for the eligible for the statewide transportation improvement fund within 2 to 3 meetings. So we think that is probably doable again to get people caught up on this. I think the question about continuing meeting and monitoring the progress, about seeing how things are going and being more engaged, is an open question. And I think had we had more to share, had we gone farther with getting stuff more on the ground, I think there would be an opportunity for the committee to meet again. You're right, Clackamas County does have several formed public transportation districts. They have more. They're bigger. They have more people in the rural area too. And then your other question was about the terms. That I can go either way. And then the third question was about, what was the third one?
potential funding.
Baseline finances. So
Yeah.
we got the first revenue forecasts a week ago, and for the Washington County that's outside of the SMART and TriMet district, it's somewhere around $300,000 a year. We are expecting that to decrease because those didn't reflect the forecasted payroll, employee payroll. So we're expecting that the next forecast that comes out in July will be lower. That's what we're working with. And we're working actually right now to look at, because we didn't expand in the middle of COVID, we will have some carryover that we think could kind of hold us over for the decline. So Ride Connection is doing some numbers on that now. For the regional coordination services, the 3 shuttles, I was going to look this up before I came, but it's roughly, I think, between $1 and $1.5 million a year for the operations of those. And that's a big enough range that I think it's good. And it is narrow because we're only looking at the STIF funding. I think the other benefit of having this transit committee is that there are opportunities to go after discretionary grants through the STIF funding. And we did that before and got a discretionary grant. And I think having a more robust list of projects and agreement on what our priorities are will help us in positioning and going after the various grants that are also available. So with that, if there's no more questions, I'll just quickly wrap up with some next steps. So this, just to clarify the process, we have the county is in the process of doing a transit development plan, which we didn't need in the first biennium because we were able to, it kind of gave us all newbies a pass on that one. And Aaron Wardell's group is putting that together right now. That's moving forward. So we're getting the advice from the transit committee and then seeking your input as things move forward to the to TriMet. And last time we didn't have the board take official action, but it seems clear that that's an important step because all the contracts with Ride Connection and the IGAs with TriMet come back to you. So we want to take time to make that a more explicit step this time. The recommendations from this group go to the HB 2017 Advisory Committee, which Commissioner Rogers sits on, and then it goes to the board for their approval to TriMet board, and then it goes to ODOT, and this ODOT process took about 6 months before. They do a completeness review, they have their own committees look at it and make recommendations to the OTC. Then the money comes back to TriMet, and then it gets distributed back to us. So it's not that hard.
A pure government process, isn't it?
And then schedule-wise?
Can I ask one quick question? So while we were under the executive order to stay home, I'm assuming the shuttles did not run?
A good question. They did follow social distancing. And so they can't have more than a certain numbers of people on the buses. And so if they had to, sometimes they'd have to go back and do another run to pick up people they had to leave behind. But they've continued to operate. There have been additional costs for the cleaning and all that, which we included as a potential request for reimbursement as well.
Okay. So it'd be interesting to see. I used to get some of those statistics from the North Hillsborough shuttle through the chamber. I haven't seen those for quite some time. It'd be interesting to see maybe what pre-COVID versus currently, and certainly with an expectation that sometime they're going to return back to the levels pre.
Yeah, and we want to move forward with those expansions to improve the increased frequency on the Grove Link services and the Banks and Northline services as well.
Right.
So final slide. So we'll be back to you June 23rd for action on this. We are planning July and August Transit Advisory Committee meetings. Our goal is to get those all set up so that they're all set. And then coming back to you in mid-August for action or endorsement on the project priorities that go off to the TriMet committee. And then the TriMet wants to pull those together in late August and then take them to their board in September and October. This schedule, I have to be honest, is tight. Last time we had until November 1st to hand everything in. TriMet wants to do it sooner, and we're kind of negotiating on that a little bit. I think we'll see. So that's all I have.
So as far as the board appointment, this committee does deal with services all across the county, including the ride shuttle in Tualatin. I would really like to have the opportunity to serve on this committee, given the full county range that it does include. I don't have any other questions. Do any other commissioners have questions or information needs, comments?
Thank you.
Okay.
Go for it.
Great, thank you.
We'll see you again on the 23rd. Okay. Behavioral Health Council applicants. I almost asked you earlier if you wanted to switch this, but I saw Chris in the audience, so I figured I needed to stick to the program.
This time I'm here to present applicants for the Behavioral Health Council. The Behavioral Health Council is a 19-member advisory body that provides strategic direction, input on priorities, and guidance to the behavioral health program. A priority for the council is to ensure that consumer voice is considered in all decisions and program direction. For this reason, we have a strong value of including individuals with lived experience. Many of our council members have lived experience with mental health and addictions, either as family members or as persons in recovery. Another priority for the council is to ensure that we have broad representation of the community with many perspectives. To this end, you'll notice that about half of the positions are dedicated to specific areas, many representing provider services. The reason for the strong emphasis on provider services is because we contract out almost all of our services, and we want to make sure that that voice is heard and that we have a very coordinated strategy. For the citizen advocate positions, we work really hard to ensure that the positions represent unique perspectives within our community. For this appointment, we had 19 applicants for 12 openings. Unfortunately, one of our openings is in a defined position for which we didn't receive any applicants, and that is a position of a family member of a child recipient. We'll actively recruit for that position next year. Given the number of applicants we had, I was kind of surprised we didn't fill all the positions. The remaining 11 openings all have really great candidates. So our process that we take is to invite the candidates to attend council meetings after they've submitted their applications. This allows the council, this allows them to see how the council works, and also so that the various council members can meet them and kind of see what their perspective is and interest on being on the council. Prior to making a recommendation to the board, we invite the existing members to discuss our priorities for the year. This year, our council identified that having expanding consumer voice and cultural perspectives was a priority for the group. So the recommendations below are based on that discussion and then the members voting on the various applicants. 2 of our positions are required by the bylaws to be endorsed by our local provider association. So the Behavioral Health Provider Association, the Tri-County Behavioral Health Provider Association endorsed the following people. Kim Cooper is a clinical manager at Morrison Child and Family Services, one of the largest youth behavioral health service providers in Washington County. She's worked for Morrison for 8 years and currently manages their Washington County location. Marcia Hilly is the executive director of Sequoia Mental Health, a behavioral health agency supporting individuals with severe and persistent mental illness. Marcia has been attending the Behavioral Health Council meetings for some time now, just out of interest. We have 3 other defined positions that are currently open. As I mentioned, the family member of a youth receiving services didn't have a candidate, but the other positions did. For the position of representative of K through 12 education, John Sheridan submitted an application. He is a special education social worker for the Beaverton School District and was recommended by the previous person in that position. Karen James is being recommended to fill the position of family member of an adult recipient of services. She has a long history of advocacy within our community, and especially emphasis of supporting individuals with behavioral health concerns who are incarcerated in our jail. The remaining 7 positions are all citizen advocate positions. We have 2 individuals that would like to be reappointed for a second term. Carol Greeno previously managed behavioral health services in Alaska before retiring here in Washington County. She's been a really active member of our council. She's helped with new initiatives, she's helped with provider selection. We've really appreciated her input over the years. And then Dustin Sluman is a sergeant with the Washington County Sheriff's Office. He manages the mental health response team. And he's also engaged in a lot of cross-system initiatives to help the system coordinate around individuals with behavioral health concerns, people who have contact with law enforcement. So we've really appreciated his input as well. The remaining open positions have had a lot of competition this year with the number of applicants we had. With our emphasis on appointing individuals with lived experience and a variety of cultural perspectives, we'd like the Board of Commissioners to consider appointing the following individuals. Jessica Cardinal is working as a manager for our brand new 4D Young Adult Drop-In Center, Recovery Center in Hillsborough. She is great. She identifies as both a professional in the field as well as somebody who's living in recovery and really wants to speak to both of those perspectives. Balpreet Singh applied for the council to provide both a cultural perspective and to share his experience as somebody who's utilized our services. His goal is to make sure that services like he receives continues to be available in our community. And then Stephen Youngs is a peer specialist with Bridges to Change. He has lived experience with substance use and is a graduate of our drug court. Finally, the council members are recommending that Eric Schmidt, who is an individual with significant experience in county government and has worked with AOC in the past, be appointed. He's interested in bringing his experience to the council and assist with advocacy. And then finally, Emily McCarr is a paramedic with Metro West and frequently responds to calls for individuals who have behavioral health conditions. And so she really wants to bring that experience to the council and make a difference in our community. So like I said, there were many applicants. A lot of folks attended the meetings throughout the last few months, and so we really appreciate the level of engagement. But are there any questions?
I don't have any questions. I was just really impressed with the whole roster of folks, and it's just phenomenal. Actually, I did have a question. With such a diverse range of folks and a large council, I mean, compared to some other committees, how do you manage to find a day of the week and a time of day that works for most of the council members?
You know, that's a great question. We actually did a poll of the council members to ask if the time was working, and it's been established long before me, many years before me. And we asked if there were other times that they would prefer, and all but I think one person said, no, the current time is working for me. I want to continue that. So I don't know, but our attendance is usually really good.
Yeah. Great.
But
Other
congratulations, and I think there's something that's said, there's testimony in having such quality group of people that you're able to recruit and retain
Yeah,
on this council. So
yes.
it reflects well on you and our county.
We were really excited with this. I mean, and one of the things that we do is we always invite the candidates that don't get appointed to keep coming because we have some really rich discussions and love to hear all the perspectives.
Other commissioners in the room? Nope. Commissioner Rogers, do you have any questions or comments? Okay.
No.
Seeing none, we'll look forward to this coming back to us for the formal appointments then. Looks like a great roster.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is Colin Fitzgerald here for the Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council, or is he on Zoom?
He is on Zoom, Madam Chair.
Wonderful. Hello, Colin. Colin, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Welcome.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and commissioners. The Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council is a 15-member council that serves in an advisory capacity to the Washington County Department of Health and Human Services. The council provides input on program development, planning, monitoring, and funding issues. The council meets one time a month in an accessible location in Beaverton, with members agreeing to the current time and location. Members of the DD Council are recipients of service, advocates, professionals in the field, provider representatives, and family members. Positions on the DD Council are not specified in the bylaws, but current council members are focused on building a council that includes a diverse and broad representation of the Washington County community. A priority of the council this year is to raise awareness to key issues impacting the intellectual and developmental disabilities community. A few examples of those key issues include ensuring adequate funding to local DD programs, finding affordable housing for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and a continued emphasis on employment for people with disabilities. This group has consistently provided invaluable feedback to the Washington County Developmental Disabilities Program. For this appointment, we had 4 applicants for 4 vacancies. 1 applicant is seeking reappointment with 3 new applicants to the council. We have invited all applicants to recent council meetings. The HHS department recommends reappointment of Sean Savage and the new appointments of Ann Madden, Catherine Moran, and Jessica Turner to the Developmental Disabilities Advisory Council. The first applicant, Ann Madden, is applying to the DD Council for the 2nd consecutive year. Ann has been a regular attendee of our DD Council meetings the past year and a half. Ann previously served on the DD Council back in the 1970s. She has also served on the Washington County Special Olympics Advisory Council, Washington County Public Affairs Forum during the late 1990s through 2010, and was past president of the Cedar Mill Library Board. Ann also served on the board of Fame Academy for 10 years, including 6 as chair. Ann lives in District 2 and has a family member experiencing intellectual and developmental disabilities. Ann has been very involved in the DD community in Washington County and would like to continue her volunteer work on the council. Catherine Moran is also applying for the DD Council for the 2nd consecutive year and also has been a consistent attendee to our meetings. Catherine resides in District 4 and is a program director for Quiet Waters Outreach, a local nonprofit that provides respite opportunities and attendant care supports to individuals and families in our community. Catherine has recently provided advocacy in Salem for DD services and understands that funding is an important issue for the DD community. With the expected growth in Washington County over the next several years, the need for DD services will increase. Katie would like to volunteer for the DD Council to ensure funding for services are properly allocated and continue her advocacy work. Jessica Turner is applying for the DD Council for the first time. Jessica is a parent of an individual experiencing intellectual and developmental disabilities and resides in District 4. She is currently a senior at Portland State University studying urban and public affairs and is serving on the Parks Board for the city of Cornelius. Jessica stated it is really important for her to seek community inclusion for people of all ages experiencing developmental disabilities and would like to work with the DD Council on finding innovative solutions to maximize services while managing costs. Jessica would love to bring her experience as a parent of a child with developmental disabilities to the council. Our final applicant, Sean Savage, is reapplying for reappointment to the DD Council. Sean was first appointed on May 2nd, 2017, and this would be a 2nd consecutive term serving on the council. Sean resides currently in District 2 and would like to be reappointed to the DD Council to continue his advocacy for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, specifically around housing issues and ensuring people are receiving necessary supports to live independent and productive lives. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have about our applicants. Thank you.
Commissioners, any questions or comments? Your mic's not on.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, thank you. Ann Madden was a longtime employee of the county as well, and really well respected and appreciated working in the communications area. So very dynamic and warm person.
Any other commissioners? Commissioner Rogers, any questions or comments?
Oh, I agree with Dick and Ann Madden, a terrific person when she was with the county.
I would like to contribute, once again, a great roster of folks. Thank you to the team for getting the word out, continuing to build rapport amongst our community, and ensuring there's a great deal of involvement and representation. I would also, I'm glad that Kristen is still here in the audience as well. I want to thank each of your groups, not just you as our staff members, but also in leading these councils, in keeping them informed and working with our government relations team as we continue to advocate at the state legislative level for more funding for behavioral health and for the intellectually, developmentally disabled. Our government relations team has done a lot of work working with the departments to practice getting the word for needs and opportunities out there. We've seen it in terms of our legislative agenda, and I'm just really proud of the work from the government relations team, but also in working with your councils so that our legislative delegation gets those real community examples that they keep asking us for whenever we as commissioners meet with them. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So Colin, when do you plan to bring these back? On the 16th, I see, if I just read the page. Great. Well, it looks like we're all thumbs up here.
Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you for joining us on Zoom. And next, we'll move on to the Fair Board and Fairgrounds Advisory Committee appointments. Welcome, Leah Perkins Hagley.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. I think I was here, was it 2 weeks ago, and presented the Fair Board applicants to you, and I'm back this week. I hope you had the opportunity to review the applicants, and we do have a staff recommendation for you. Just in a quick little review, we did have 4 applicants, and I think that you had testimony this morning from a Fair Board applicant who was interested in being appointed as well, Mitch Nussbaumer. And just so you do know that today we have received just about 50 emails from various supporters who would like to see Mitch appointed to the Fair Board. However, that is not the staff recommendation that we are presenting to you today. However, we are open to whatever the Fair Board's pleasure is. I just want to...
Fair Board or the Board of Commissioners?
I'm sorry, the Board of Commissioners. And my next sentence was going to be the Fair Board is in cooperation with the Fair Board when we discussed the applicants. This is not only staff recommendation, but the Fair Board's recommendation for appointment as well. Mr. Chakrapini brings a lot of great things that the Fair Board is currently lacking. Several things that he's involved with, which is 4-H robotics and youth team robotics and Legos that we don't currently have represented at the fair, and he'd like to see some different kinds of technology added for youth that we are currently lacking. He's got a lot of ideas for cultural activities at the fair, and he also brings in a really big presence of bringing in big sponsorship dollars for the events that he is currently producing and managing, which is something the Fair Board is severely lacking as well, which is why the Fair Board and the staff are recommending Mr. Chakrapini to be the replacement for Aaron Carroll, who was our technology representative that resigned earlier this year.
Any questions from the board members?
I have one, and that's Jerry.
Commissioner Rogers, Commissioner Scouten is speaking at the moment.
I couldn't hear him.
Yeah, it's tough all around. We're on virtual, et cetera. We do have already a good representation on the ag side and on the rural side.
Yes,
I
we
mean,
do. We have 2 members representing 4-H, FFA, and agricultural already. Bill Ganger was just reappointed at the beginning of this year to represent our youth 4-H and FFA seat. And then we do have Andy Dyke, who represents agriculture on the Fair Board.
Thank you.
Commissioner Rogers?
I was just going to ask Commissioner Willie, since he serves there, that what his recommendation is.
That's my recommendation as well. I met with Gary Seidel, the board chair, and we reviewed the applicants, and we both agreed that it should be this candidate. We would recommend appointment.
Thank you.
So my comment is, I think we should make the table bigger. I've gotten a lot of information from different folks from the agriculture community, both during the course of my campaign and my 15 plus months on this board, that there are a lot of agriculture folks who continue to feel disenfranchised by the various members of the Fair Board. And I think we have a real opportunity to expand the table and bring in more voices. And so my recommendation actually is I've looked at what little information one can find on our website and the FAIR website without going to the ORS. And I don't see any reason why we can't appoint more than one additional member at this time, which is in total line with our meeting of December 10th, when we wanted to make sure, our direction then was to make sure that we had additional agriculture representation on the Fair Board. So I think that the recommendation from the current Fair Board, as well as from staff and Commissioner Willie, is a great recommendation. But I think it would be a good move on our part to expand the number of voices and the representation. So that's my viewpoint. I know I shared when this was back before us on May 19th and in our advance packet, the continued rationale following that December meeting and continued information from the community members. So I think we should go with both.
Well, I have to ask that I think this is something the Fair Board should weigh in on and probably then make more of a presentation about what areas that they already have represented. And if there are any missing pockets, then we would have that conversation. But I'm not comfortable right now adding 2 more members and changing the description of the board without having the board input and approval. As you know, the board functions under a separate agreement with the fairgrounds, and so I think it would be very important that we include them in that conversation before making that recommendation. I also have to say that if you wanted to do 2, I think we have to go back and review the other 3 applicants and say who's second, rather than just taking the chair's recommendation.
Well, I've said it before, I would not have appointed, had I been on the commission in December of 2018, I would not have appointed a former county commission member. I think it's a bad precedent. I think there's a reason why our Oregon ethics talks about being very careful about having appointed members serve in lobbying their former elected bodies for 2 years. But I'm not asking to revisit backwards, rather recognize where we are in our community now and the needs that we have. My concern is by appointing just one person, we're essentially sticking with the status quo. And I think that the range of concern that I know I've been hearing as the chair of the Washington County Commission, as well as serving on the Fairgrounds Advisory Commission, tells me over and over and over again that we have too many people in our agriculture community who feel disenfranchised by the status quo. And that's why I think let's try and expand the table and go from there. That's all.
Well, and I would disagree again, because the person that we're recommending for appointment is not the status quo. It fills in a gap that we absolutely need and gives us a different dimension, certainly in diversity. So I would say we're filling in the blanks. And again, if you want to have another conversation about adding an 8th member, then let's have that. But I am not encouraging that to be done at this point, and certainly in this venue without further discussion.
Well, and also I remember that we Board of Commissioners are the ones that make the appointment and not the Fair Board. So
Usually, you listen to the recommendations.
we're not a rubber stamp, and I will never advocate for the Board of Commissioners being a rubber stamp of any of our commissions, boards, or committees.
Aren't there bylaws for the Fair Board?
The Fair Board does have bylaws. However, I do believe, and I will double check, that ORS 565 prohibits more than 7 members. So I would have to check on that, but, and I can check on that and get back to you.
My point was, before we look at expansion, we need to make sure that we know what the bylaws are, and then.
Well, good luck finding them on our website or on the Fair's website.
So
I've tried repeatedly.
I will double check on that, because they should be posted and easily to find.
They're not easily
Okay,
acceptable.
then I will definitely address that. However, it's Oregon Revised Statute 565 that addresses the number of Fair Board members, and I believe that it does limit it at 7, but I will follow up on that as well.
I think the only comment that I would make is that if you feel, Chair, that it's inappropriate to pick a past commissioner, that's fine, but I would take exception to any inference that there was anything unethical about his appointment or his role on the board. And there's nothing inherently unethical about doing that. You may have other policy reasons, but I will take it that inference is not something that you really were
I
implying.
didn't state that. I said it's a bad precedent.
You also talked about an unethical piece, so I just wanted to caution you that's something I would disagree
I
with.
pointed out that it's defined by the Oregon Government Ethics Commission.
Well, I just
and
want to
those
make sure,
rules.
there was an inference there, and I just wanted to.
I made no inference.
Well, other people can make the inference, it's not you that
That
makes the
I
inference.
agree with.
Okay, so at the risk of being argumentative, I just want to make that clear, because I can't think of anyone more ethical than our past chair, Andy Dyke. He's really a person that's really outstanding in that area. So.
Yeah, I'll chime in too. I don't know what the chair's comment was meant to be, and she's clarifying it, which is good. But listening from the outside, it sounded like there was some ethics issue that we all ought to know about. If that's not what was intended, okay, that's fine. We just need to say that. But I would agree with Commissioner Scouten. Commissioner Dyke was an outstanding, upbeat guy who has a lot of integrity and ethics. So I was a little bit surprised at the comment.
State statute or?
565, 210, sub 2.
So hearing no further direction, would you like me to come back in 2 weeks for appointment, or would you like more time on?
One commissioner shook his head no. What would the rest of the commission like to do? And I think Commissioner Rogers spoke in support of the recommendation as well.
I did.
I support the recommendation.
I can support the recommendation based on what you identified as the needs of the commission right now, and the fact that Mr. Surakapani provides that level of skill set.
And at no time did I speak against the qualities of the person recommended.
Great. Well, I will be back in 2 weeks. Thank you.
Thank you.
You have an FAC recommendation?
Actually, that was not on the agenda. I know I saw that it got added on the work session, that it was also a FAC appointment, but it's actually not. It's Fair Board only. I added a note at the bottom of which is why I think that got added into the title. I just was adding a note because sometimes the Fair Board and the Fairgrounds Advisory Committee kind of get crossed over because we have crossover membership, and there are two boards that operate out of that facility. So I was just adding that in there as a reference, knowing that we did, when I was here in December, and we talked about the Fair Board and the FAC at the same time, that we will be we have a FAC meeting coming up on June 24th, and we'll be requesting that they revise their bylaws to expand their seats. And then we will be bringing those bylaws and those extra board appointments back to you at that time.
And this goes back to our direction at our
Yes.
December 10th meeting.
Exactly. Thank you for bringing that up.
Okay.
All right, we're a little ahead of schedule. We have a choice at this point. We could either take a break now for 15 minutes, or Robin is in the audience. If you'd like, we can go through your presentation first. Okay, well, why don't you come on up and we'll go through the annual sustainability report. Were there any staff members who are planning on attending by Zoom? Okay, great.
Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. For the record, I'm Erin Calvert with the County Administrative Office, and I have had the pleasure of working more closely with the sustainability team over the last 11 months. Toward the end of 2019, Robin and the sustainability team began thinking about their annual report and their presentation to the board, which was planned for April. And they also noted that April of 2020 was the 50th anniversary of Earth Day. And so wanting to make an event of it, they began to develop a proclamation for Earth Day. They secured a keynote speaker and they planned a mini fair. They also planned to present their annual report to the board at that time. But as you all know, 2020 had other plans for all of us and it delayed some of our work. Your board did proclaim April as Earth Month, recognizing the 50-year anniversary, but the annual report did get postponed until today. And so with that, it's my pleasure to hand it over to the Sustainability Program Coordinator, Robin Strawn, for the annual report.
Thank you, Erin. Good afternoon, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. As Erin mentioned, my name is Robin Strawn. I'm the county's Sustainability Coordinator. Before I get started, I want to express my gratitude for the statement read by the chair at this morning's board meeting regarding racial justice. We fully support the board and the county's commitment to lead with race and to work to make the county more equitable. Thank you for taking the time to address this important topic. Sorry. I know, I'm in the same boat as Marnie here. All right. Thank you for the opportunity to share our progress update today. This presentation is based on our annual Sustainability Program Progress Summary, and this report was included in the board packet, and it will be uploaded onto the sustainability website this week. My presentation will cover highlights of the report, including an overview of the county's sustainability program, achievements in fiscal year 2019, and a peek at work happening this year. I want to note, as Erin did, just reiterate, the report was completed early this year before the COVID-19 pandemic. It focuses mostly on accomplishments and work from the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2019. However, in this presentation, I will showcase some of the work happening in this fiscal year and note a few areas where there may be impacts. Next slide, please. Thank you. Washington County's sustainability program is primarily focused on internal county operations. To that end, we provide guidance throughout the organization for sustainable practices and target ways to encourage sustainable behaviors. Sustainability at Washington County includes improving day-to-day operations and longer-term planning. We focus on all aspects of sustainability to ensure a well-rounded program and engage all county departments. The key elements include planning and policy development, education and awareness of employees and constituents, technical assistance to departments and community partners, and progress measurement and tracking. Next slide, please. Washington County's sustainability program is guided by the definition shown here, focused on engaging and supporting employees, promoting healthy habits, celebrating diversity and collaboration, and being good stewards of county finances and natural resources. I'll be transitioning to achievements from the last fiscal year next. Are there any questions before I move on? Next slide, please. The sustainability program had a lot of great achievements in fiscal year 2019. We engaged employees in new ways, innovated solutions to sustainability challenges, and helped promote community social equity. Here are a few accomplishments highlighted in our progress summary. The sustainability program launched a dishware loan system, enabling county employees to borrow durable dishes and tablecloths, such as the ones you're using, to reduce the use of disposables and save money. Since starting, the project has kept thousands of tableware items out of the landfill and promoted a culture of sustainability. The program is one effort to reduce single-use items and disposable plastics in order to cut our garbage. In early 2019, we held a household goods drive for the community warehouse, and it was their most successful drive ever by a local business. The county employees donated more than 800 items. They actually stopped counting at 800 items that directly benefited families and individuals in need. And I should note that this drive was repeated in early 2020, and we have a lot of items to donate, and we look forward to donating those to the community warehouse now that they have reopened. And several events celebrating Earth Day in April 2019 engaged hundreds of employees. Activities included a scavenger hunt, an eco-friendly eating challenge, an energy fair staffed by educational vendors paired with an electric vehicle showcase, and a sustainable chili cook-off. Next slide, please. The county organization moved the needle on many other environmental, social, and economic sustainability practices in the last fiscal year. A few examples of this great work are noted here. The Public Services Building seismic retrofit was completed in 2019 and apartments settled back in. The project provided the opportunity to make efficiency upgrades to critical lighting and mechanical systems, which will improve the sustainability of this building. The County Administrative Office convened a diversity, equity, and inclusion work group in summer 2018 focused on improving equitable outcomes for the county. The group provided direction for the county's equity priorities and strategies in their winter 2018 report. Cooperative Library Services Outreach and Courier Facility added an automated materials handling machine for holds processing. This saves time and money by improving staff efficiency, cutting energy use at libraries, and reducing the miles driven for deliveries. Finally, county departments initiated additional programs for food scrap diversion to commercial compost, including the Blanton Street office and Harkins House Juvenile Residential Center in 2019. Next slide, please. Are there any questions before I move on to the internal sustainability measures?
Commissioner Rogers, do you have any questions up to this point? Thank you, Robin, for the cue.
Yeah, you're welcome. Next slide. Okay. The sustainability program tracks progress on goals to reach by the end of fiscal year 2020, starting from a baseline year of 2008. In 2019, the county exceeded our goals in building energy, water, fleet fuel, and garbage reduction per full-time equivalent employee. Our internal data is normalized by FTE, providing an accurate year-to-year comparison of resource use. I should note that FTE rose nearly 39% since 2008, and this impacts the denominator when normalizing our data. Over the last several years, the county has prioritized efficiency upgrades, shown by outperforming goals in these areas. Goals were originally developed for a 10-year horizon, but due to the drastic changes to building occupancy and facility space, the goals were extended to 2020 to allow better comparison to the baseline year. We were hoping that in 2020 things would re-normalize, but yet here we are. Nevertheless, we will plan to revisit these goals and initiate the development of a new plan later this year as we compile our final achievements, assess our goals, and see how we fared. I will highlight more information on this data in the chart in the next few slides. Next slide, please. Thank you. The next three graphs show progress on county sustainability metrics. As you can see here, the county's building energy use per FTE dropped 35% since 2008. This is a really terrific achievement. These building energy conservation gains were the result of facilities upgrades and employees taking action to save energy. Electricity is the largest utility cost for the county, so facilities and sustainability have made conservation and efficiency a priority. We work with the Energy Trust of Oregon in their Strategic Energy Management Program and receive incentives for energy-related projects and engagement. Of course, yes.
You use the full-time equivalents as the baseline, which I haven't seen before. So,
Yeah.
Can you give me a little background on that?
Yeah, so we selected that because it's the one thing that's consistent across all of our internal measures, because we measure things like fleet fuel. And if we did square feet, it wouldn't make sense with fleet fuel. I also have all of the same data normalized by square footage, and I have them in absolute numbers. If you'd prefer, I can share those as well.
No, this is perfectly fine because, I mean, as from 2008 to 2019, I'm assuming we've increased the FTEs by quite a bit, but we've also increased our energy usage and buildings and all kinds of things.
So we added 39%. Our FTE went up 39% since 2008 to 2019. So when you think about things like energy usage, that's more computers, that's potentially more space, more lights, a lot of things that are related to just having more bodies hired by the county.
Yeah. No, I think it's pretty good measurement. It certainly would be easier to measure with than square footage or buildings or cars or something like that. So yeah, I think that's
and it grows kind of incrementally over the years. Square footage, it tends to can even fluctuate a lot between the years just because we have to lease temporary space and things change a lot, but our FT just kind of ratchets up a little bit.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Yeah, I'll concur. I really appreciate that FTE level because in my prior agency, there was a different gauge per category, and it was kind of like having whiplash. Okay, so you're trying to appreciate the gains at the same time of making sure you've got the metric right. So
Agreed.
It really makes this much easier to follow.
Good, thank you. So it's interesting when you think about our goals that we're trying to reduce, it actually helps us as our numbers of people grow, but then our numbers that we're trying to increase, it hurts us, like recycling, and you'll see that, but yeah. Okay. Any other questions on this first bit of data and the normalization? Okay, all right, I think we're ready for, yes, garbage. Thank you for getting the next slide for me. For the first time this year, the county met the garbage reduction goal. The county's garbage generated per FTE has dropped 26% since 2008. This is a great accomplishment and shows the county's commitment to cutting waste. Since this is an area where all employees can play a role, we will continue to promote waste reduction and prevention. Now, during COVID, we're seeing changes in garbage as a lot more things have to be sort of throwaway, disposable, takeout, but we're going to be continuing to be committed to trying to find where there are reusable options for things. So the county has increased recycling and composting, progressing towards significant recycling and recovery rate goals. In fact, the absolute recycling amount is up 53%, and recycling per square foot is up 33%. Changes in the recycling markets have slowed progress toward the recycling per FTE goal, but composting has been growing. Compost volumes have more than doubled since 2008. The county continues to assess opportunities to expand food scrap collections at facilities to divert recoverable food for composting. And in fiscal year 2020, we expanded the compost collection into the PSB.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yes.
I wasn't sure if during the phase 0 period, I don't really want to call it shutdown, but where we tried to have more telework and limit our office use, on the occasional days where I was using the compost bucket, and I might have seen a notice and forgotten it, it was unclear to me if composting in the building was still available. But now that we're in phase 1 and hopefully working towards continued phases, is that program active here in PSB? And maybe I need to look at horizons more than I actually do?
No, that's a great question, Chair Harrington. So we left it up to each individual office space and their sustainability liaison to decide if they wanted to shut down or maintain their compost system. They would need to make sure that that bin could be emptied at least twice a week so we didn't get any pest issues. And if that key person was out of the office because they were working remotely, we asked them to shut down. The Cappuccino Corner stayed open, and they're actually the largest generator of compost in this building. So that program, we never turned that off with our garbage system, but some different offices did close. They literally took away their bins. So if there was still a bin in your office, it probably means that someone was taking care of it for you.
There was quite a furry scientific experiment in ours. So at one point, I tied it up and put it in the trash.
That's more than acceptable.
Okay.
Yeah, I think as we start getting more people back in the offices, it'll make sense to restart all those programs.
Okay, thank you.
But I will mention that at the sustainability liaisons at their meeting this month, that if they've closed it down, to think about reopening, and if they forgot to close it down, maybe go check to see if there's a science experiment. Okay.
So the garbage part, though, is more than food composting. It's like maybe we're using more electronic data rather than printing them out, or we're recycling the paper better.
I did work with facilities to see if we could actually reduce some of our garbage pickup, because we had such a small amount of people in all of our offices, and we were generating less paper, generating less waste in general. I'm not sure where they landed with that, but yeah, the impacts of COVID and people being out of the buildings more often has been very different. We've been trying to support our liaisons with information on how to take these strategies home, so reducing your waste at home or reducing your energy use at home too. Okay, next slide. All right, Fleet Services has driven reductions in fuel use, which exceed the 2020 goals. Fuel use is down 37% per FTE, and it is also down 31% per vehicle and down 12% in total gallons purchased since 2008. Fleet has invested in more efficient vehicles of all types, including 33 hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and all-electric vehicles. 7 hybrid patrol interceptor utility vehicles are being added for the Sheriff's Office in 2020. EcoBiz, question, what is an EcoBiz? Okay, EcoBiz is a certification actually supported by Clean Water Services. It's a program that you can apply for, and I think I can't remember, it's a partnership with Clean Water Services and another agency, but they verify that you are properly handling any materials that you have that could cause toxic emissions or leakage. So for instance, like if you've toured our fleet shop, you see they have things contained, they're using things in bulk, so they're not generating more extra trash that's toxic. They have to do a number of different tasks that show that they're using environmentally preferred practices, so reducing their impact on the environment in general. And it's a pollution prevention program that's operated locally.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Could you repeat that line about the Sheriff's Office for me again?
Yes. So 7 hybrid patrol interceptor utility vehicles are being added for the Sheriff's Office in 2020. That's the number that was ordered. I think a lot of vehicle deliveries have been delayed due to factory shutdowns. But that's, I believe it's a Ford Escape. I I don't think Tom Kaiser, our fleet manager, is here, but I think it's like a Ford Escape type vehicle that's got a hybrid motor to it. So they shouldn't actually be idling, but they have an auxiliary battery that will keep all their systems running inside the vehicle.
Great.
And it's the first year of that vehicle, and a lot of jurisdictions around Oregon have ordered them. So we're really excited to start seeing those rolled out. Okay, so these efficient vehicles reduce environmental impacts of unnecessary idling, maximize fuel economy, and cut overall vehicle emissions without compromising performance. So in addition, Fleet has also worked with facilities to upgrade and add more electric vehicle charging stations for county vehicles and for public use. They switched from a standard petroleum diesel to a blended biodiesel, renewable diesel fuel. They have maintained their EcoBiz certified shop since 2011 using environmentally preferred practices, and they were named one of the top 100 fleets in the Americas for the past 3 years running.
I would just like to say, because of the work that you and our facilities team have done, as well as Commissioner Schouten sharing his experience with having an electric car, those two coupled, the having chargers and then your positive experience made me a lot more comfortable in my family's car choice experience. And I am just amazed. I have to essentially work at getting the battery usage down. So a little bit of encouragement and experiential sharing can go a long way. So thank you very
agree.
much to all those efforts.
I'm a fellow Chevy Bolt owner, and it's been amazing just seeing changes in the way we spend our time fueling, right?
Yep.
It charges at home instead of having to go to gas stations, and it's nice to, at this weird time, don't have to touch anything when you go out in the community. So yeah, and the county just added our very first all-electric vehicle that is a Chevy Bolt to our motor pool, and those are now in operation for the county. Yeah.
Well, I hope employees will have fun experiencing that. That's great.
Thank you. Next slide, please. Beyond saving natural resources and protecting the environment, the county also saves taxpayer dollars by implementing sustainability practices. This chart includes the total annual costs for different resources purchased in the 2008 baseline year, adjusted for inflation with the Consumer Price Index, as compared to the total amount paid in 2019 for the same resources. Along with reductions in usage, fuel cost volatility did help drive the cost savings you're seeing in natural gas and fleet fuel. And regarding paper use, at least half of all county departments have initiated some type of paper reduction project. Next slide, please. Are there any questions before I move on to community sustainability measures?
Commissioner Rogers, any questions? Commissioners in the room?
No, I'd just say that those numbers are pretty impressive.
Thank you.
We cut our paper costs by 50%.
Exactly, yeah. And timing couldn't be better to make things electronic and available to the public that way. So I think kudos to all of our departments that have been working to get their permits and other processes online and digitized.
Yeah, good information, thank you.
I think it's also going to be interesting to see if, and I'm not sure if this is measurable, but what happened during the COVID time. And I'm hoping that what we see is a usage here drops down during COVID time, but we've learned new ways to communicate new things. And so I'm sure it'll come back up, but it will hopefully level off and stay lower than it was previously.
Yeah,
So-
I think you're right. I think if that was the first exposure to using an online service or some sort of new way of doing business, I think people will make that change. And especially since we don't know how long this is really going to be drawn out, where we need to be physically distant from other people, people may just sort of embrace it, those that have the ability and capability to use computers, services, and whatnot.
Well, I also think that there may have been I'm hoping that there was a public impact in just seeing the visuals on places like LA, where all of a sudden, without car traffic, you could see the city where you couldn't see it before, and those types of things that were impactful for me, and I think impactful for others, that we have this capability to make significant changes. It's how we choose to do it.
I agree. That's a big topic in the sustainability world right now. Realizing that we might need to go back to a new normal that's not the same as the baseline that we were used to before, and having people exposed to doing things like teleworking when they maybe didn't think they could do it before. We have a lot of opportunity right now to impact climate change positively.
I do have one question.
Yep.
Thank you. I couldn't unmute it fast enough. It's always been good work. We've seen this over several years, but I think the question was maybe asked previously in a different way. The results are going to obviously change over time as you accomplish more of these sustainability initiatives. So how do you have some elasticity in the percentages so that someone doesn't say, well, gee, you're not really accomplishing much of a change from year to year when you've done most of the big work? So what do you continue to measure, and how do you continue to measure it to show that there's progress being made?
That's a great question, Commissioner. I honestly don't know at this point. I kind of inherited these goals when I started here, and we just built on them with help from the division managers. But as far as what's kind of the next step in terms of setting meaningful goals, I've been eager to have that conversation, and I'm just kind of waiting for the time to be right to gather back together with the right people to start those discussions. But I think there are some different ways to think about goals. I think you can't just keep setting like, okay, we need to reduce energy more and more and more, knowing that we have a lot of changes in our organization. We maybe need to think about other things to measure. We need to think about different ways to measure. I appreciate the feedback on the normalization factor. I think that's important because I think, the county staffing is probably going to continue to grow a little bit as the county population continues to grow. So I don't have a great answer for you, Commissioner Rogers, but I will certainly keep that in mind as we think about these goals ending, seeing where we land, and then thinking about the future of sustainability goals for the county. They may look very different.
Yeah, I'd make just a couple of suggestions for just kernels of thought for you to think about, and I know my colleagues there all have thought the same things, and that is that the world has changed a bunch. Some of it was already changing, some of it because of the COVID, but a sustainability, in my mind, might be taking a look and seeing whether or not we need the square footage of room that we have. Do we still need that much square footage? How much carbon are we reducing by people staying in place versus driving in every day? How much production is being really lost to communications that have to be done in office versus online? So there is a number of things that might be measured differently. You're measuring how much garbage reduction, how much electricity was changed, and those are good measurements, but they're old paradigms. So it might be interesting for you just to take your thinking cap and turn it completely upside down and say, well, what else could we do, not only just for our organization in terms of its footprint and its use, but in terms of the environment, and what are we saving by having people work from home? So just a thought.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of people in my peers in the sustainability world we're all sort of starting to put our heads together about these types of things. So those are some great suggestions you had.
Well, and I think also, if I could leverage off of that, we have both the facility strategic plan. This board has already spoken about how we want to revisit the county vision and strategic plan, but we have to figure out the timing of all of that relative to getting our new CAO hired and on board as well. So I think you have a lot of expertise to add in each of those and cooperatively so we can figure it out together in the years ahead.
Thank you. Yes, I agree, Chair. Okay. Gonna move on to community measures real quick here. Okay. The sustainability program tracks some community objectives related to the work of county departments. This year we shared data related to sustainable building, bike lanes, pedestrian facilities, and commute options. Progress in these areas can depend on project funding, community involvement, and behavior changes. Therefore, county goals were not set for these measures. Our Land Use and Transportation Department provided data for the specific achievements noted here, and I will highlight a couple of these in the next slides. Next slide, please. Washington County issues renewable energy electrical permits for building projects and processed more than 250 permits in the last fiscal year. The majority of the renewable energy permits in our county are for solar arrays. The number has risen over time but dropped off recently. It is possible that the dip is due to changes in state and federal solar energy incentives. The financial incentives have been dropping as the price of solar panels come down, but there may have been an unusual spike in permits as the incentive changes were announced because they phased them in. So I think the scale is making this look like we're just dropping off dramatically, but really if you look at it, we're staying kind of in a similar range. Next slide, please. Data reported in the American Community Survey by the U.S. Census Bureau on the commute choices made by county residents showed nearly a 1% decrease in driving alone. Between 2008 and 2018, Washington County community members chose more active and sustainable options like transit, biking, or carpooling instead of driving by themselves. And we also know that EV driving is up too. The data has also shown an uptick in working from home. This data, this choice can cut drive-alone miles and vehicle emissions, reduce demand for office space as the workforce grows, as Commissioner Rogers just mentioned, and helps promote employee satisfaction and work-life balance. I'm sure if this survey happened today, the increase in teleworking would be off the chart. I'll be interested to see how these numbers change in the coming years as we determine a new normal for our workplaces. Do you have any questions on the community measures in the report?
I don't know that I recalled them or took note of them in last year's report, so thank you for bringing them forward again.
You're welcome.
These are also, they're from 2008 through
2018.
So
yes.
it's pretty old
Yeah.
data. I mean, I'm just pointing that out. I understand this is what's available to you, but I'm just saying that I think we have to take that into consideration as well.
Of course, I think these numbers, the numbers, so the American Community Survey is done in like 5-year increments, so it's already kind of like averaged a little bit, but then the changes happen pretty incrementally. If we were to do like an employee commute survey or something like that and get like real-time data, I think it would look very different. Okay, next slide. So moving on, I just want to mention a few highlights from our current fiscal year since we're about to wrap up. Our newest team member, Carolina, can you wave? Joined our team in 2019 as our program specialist, helping with our data management, outreach, and program support. She has led the Durable Dish Loan program and also championed a drive to collect and recycle small electronics from employees. More recently, our long-term education coordinator, Jennifer Nelson, left the county, and we just completed a recruitment to refill that position. The county joined the Portland General Electric Green Future Impact Program last summer. This program will provide 50% of the electricity for county operations from a new Oregon-based solar facility beginning in 2021, if it hasn't been delayed. This should put the county on a path to get to 100% renewable electricity by 2040. The county added a 100 kilowatt solar array to the Public Safety Training Center, which is pictured here, that came online in 2019. And around that same time, the 65 kilowatt system on this building, the Public Services building, came back online after being decommissioned due to the retrofit. In addition, the county has 2 more solar arrays planned for buildings currently under construction. Last fall, the Employee Giving Program partnered with the United Way to provide secure online giving platform for the very first time. This helps streamline the process for employees and reduce paper waste. The sustainability program data will soon be featured on the Healthier Together Washington County website as a way to visually share information from our program and tell the county's sustainability story to a broader audience. This project was delayed since the site is managed by Health and Human Services, and our project contact is assigned to the Emergency Operations Center. And there are a number of other projects noted in our report, so I encourage you to look that over and let me know if you have any questions about those. And then before I kind of wrap this up, I want to acknowledge that we know that climate change was on your priority list for this fall, and I want to note that this remains a priority for us too. So feel free to let us know if you have any thoughts related to climate action as we start preparing for that discussion and what it's going to look like for Washington County. Next slide, please.
Can I just ask a question about, you said we would be 100% renewable energy by 2040.
So we're on the path to 100% renewable electricity by 2040, which is slightly different than renewable energy.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
correct. I saw it. So where are we right now?
That's a really good question. Because
that seems like a pretty kind of audacious goal.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to know.
So
far the gap
we
is.
purchased the standard Portland General Electric electricity mix. So the utility is required to have a certain percentage of their electricity coming from renewables. I think they might be 20% in 2020, but I could be a little bit off on that. Maybe 25%. So this is really going to bump us up quite a bit. And that number, so the number that the PGE is required to provide in their basic mix is increasing toward, I think, 40% or something by 2035. And then we're buying 50%, so we're getting real close to that, getting to 100%. Plus, we're adding our own solar systems, so we're trying to get there without like just overshooting it, knowing that it's a huge added cost.
Yeah, no, it's a great goal.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so my last slide. Sorry. I want to thank you for your time today. Thank you to all of the dedicated county employees who helped make this work possible. Washington County continues to be committed to sustainable operations, even in the face of growth and change. We believe that sustainability strategies must produce measurable results and provide long-term benefits. The county is working toward meeting objectives that will make it more sustainable, effective, and resilient. What questions do you have for us?
Commissioners in the room, any questions or comments?
I don't have any more questions, but I would certainly say congratulations, good job. A two-person team out there being dynamic and doing good things. So this is great work. Thank you.
Thank you.
We've been asking questions kind of along the way, but I'd also think that maybe now's the time to put in a plug for the bike challenge. So
Thank
so
you.
I'm just going to put.
Yes, we're in the second day of the Bike More Challenge. I know we have bike riders, all of you are bike riders in this room, and the weather is fantastic. So maybe if you get some free time, go ahead and ride your bike and log that trip for us. That'd be great. It does. I don't know exactly how it works this year. Carolina, did you get any updates on how to log an indoor trip on your bike?
Come on up. Come on up. Please.
Currently, it asks you for, I think, a start and an end, and you basically log your route. But Carolina was asking them about being able to log her stationary bike rides, and I think they're working on that.
You might have to hit the mic button.
The what?
Oh, got it.
Green is good.
They are still working on it. They have an option to log in manually, but it's not ready yet. So they are working on the system, And then every time you ride your bike, your indoor bike, you're gonna be able to put the numbers. You can estimate how much you rode using the time that you rode. Yeah, but it's not ready yet.
Well, all that information is available on the screen when if you log in and on the internet and you do their programming, it tells you all of
Yeah.
that. So yeah, if we can just gather that information and manually input it into the system, that'd be great.
I think that, yeah, they're trying to make sure that
Yeah.
that'll work for everyone.
Good.
Because currently you can log the distance from one point to the other, but you are not able to put only the distance, but that's the goal.
Yeah.
But
Okay.
we'll
Be updating, or you make a post at Horizons?
Yeah, I'll be giving some email updates as we learn more from the Street Trust. It's a brand new platform for them this year, so they're working out a lot of bugs. But you'll even be able to log trips all the way into early July if you can just keep track of those. Right, and with the Peloton, I'm guessing it tracks it for you, so
Mhm,
you
it
could go
does.
back and log toward the end of the month once
Yeah,
they
I
get
get
that
an
figured
email
out.
once a week that says, "How come you haven't seen me lately?"
Oh,
So.
it's taunting you.
Well, I think they call it encouraging
Oh,
me.
okay, okay.
But I do take it as taunting, yes.
Commissioner Rogers, do you have any questions or comments?
No, I thank you. Nothing more. I encourage him once again to take a look at different metrics and put some thought into what else we're doing that to make some sense.
Great.
Excellent.
Well, thank you very much for keeping us up to date and encouraging us to continue to do our best as well.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we have two more items on today's agenda. How about if we take our 15-minute break and return here at 3:15, and then we'll get through the remaining two items? Okay, so 15-minute break, Commissioner Rogers. We'll see you back at 3:15.
There is just staff on the call right now for the afternoon.
15. So the next item on our agenda is Washington County fiscal year 2020 through 2021, I assume. Fee schedule with our interim director of support services, also our chief financial officer, Jack Leong.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Harrington and the commissioners. I am in front of you today to provide an overview of the fiscal year 2020 and 2020-21 fee schedule. As you all know, that the Washington County fees are actually an important part of the county's revenue stream, and at the same time, the various fees are also an important part of the county's engagement with the public on a business transaction level. So it's something that we actually collect in the finance division from various departments that charges fees every year, and then we assemble that into this one document, which is a fee schedule. And this year, there are a few changes that's worth to highlight in the fee schedule. And starting with the new fees is in the DA's office, that there's a criminal discovery fees for Justice Court that's added on page 6 in the working draft that you're provided. And then for Justice Court, there's adult diversion and collection fees that's added on page 10. For LUT, current planning, there's a new fee that's added for the flag lot and the infill project surcharge, neighborhood meeting mailing list, as well as template test fees. And for HHS Public Health, there is a new tuberculosis screening and case management fee, and food service license fee, child care facility inspection fee, and tobacco retail license fee. It's worth to note that the new tuberculosis screening and case management fee is actually a new fee structure, which is replacing the previous TB fees that's on the schedule already. So you will see the same that's in the deleted fees for the obsolete part. For WCCLS, the co-op library services, they remove the $5 processing fee for the lost materials and only leaves the replacement fee for the lost materials. For HHS emergency medical, we removed the additional fees for numbered students in excess of 6 in a CPR and AED training classes. This is also part of the new fee structure that they're implementing. Instead, that they're doing a flat fee for up to 10 students in each class. For LET current planning, they deleted the alteration, restoration, replacement fees to be combined with the replacement dwelling fees. That's reflected on page 16 through page 19 on the fee schedule. And HHS Public Health deleted the obsolete TB testing and case management fees and replaced it with the new fees that's implemented. So there are also 2 changed fees that's worth highlighting. For A&T, tax collection warrant fee, it was decreased to $62. This fee was adjusted in accordance with the House Bill 4007, and that is on page 5 of the working draft. And then on LUT building services and current planning, they are actually implementing quite a bit of a 5% increase in most of the fees. And then there are also some selected fees that has more significant increases to ensure cost recovery for the programs and services. So that's reflected between page 11 and 26. So these are the changes that I would like to highlight in this session, and I'll be happy to answer any of your questions.
I didn't have any questions. I really appreciate how there is the explanation of cost recovery and so forth, since we have a whole aspect of our business that is set up essentially as enterprises, and so cost recovery is really important. There are many pages.
Yes. So,
are there any questions or comments from commissioners here in the room?
It'll be interesting to see with this economy now in our COVID era, what COLAs and cost of living inflation pressures, or lack thereof, are going to be playing out going forward.
Yes, absolutely. We're tracking that as we are speaking right now. And as you are aware that for fiscal year 2021, our calculated COLA is 2.6% for our pay schedule. And if we're tracking throughout this year up till now, so if if everything freezes at this point, we're seeing a 1% COLA already. So expecting the rest of the year that might interest up a little bit, or it may go down. Like you said, it really depends on the economy.
Yeah. Well, Jack, you know this, that I've had conversations with you and with Stephen and Ruth and the whole gang. And I am not a fan of a 5% increase at this time. I think, as I've said before, we'd be accused of being tone deaf to the economy as it currently stands. We certainly hope that our construction side will continue to flourish and go back to what it was. It's been pretty strong, I think, through this whole COVID pandemic. But bottom line is, I think there was a couple of things. I asked how we compared with our region, and realizing municipalities use different money than we do. In other words, it's not cost recovery for our municipalities. But I'm concerned about, our fees being the highest in the region, quite frankly. I don't have anything to compare that to, but I was told that they are moderately high now. So I'd really like us to have some other kind of alternative than just a 5% across the board in LUT's building services and current planning services. I think that's specifically what I'm talking about. So either delaying this to a January 1 to see how we come through the fall, realizing we miss a whole season of construction activity, or we find, I don't know, I've heard 2.5 and 2.5, but to me 5 is not acceptable to me right now. Okay.
Well, in response to that comment, Commissioner Willie, thank you. Definitely a very insightful comment. Is that obviously that cost recovery has been the board's direction in the past, and this is something that's obviously adopted by the board every year as the fee schedule goes. So we definitely would like to hear the board's direction overall on that. And well, if Stephen can join the table, and we can discuss more about that as well.
Well, I understand cost recovery, but there has to be some criteria where cost recovery becomes not feasible. And I'm certainly of the mind that I don't think our taxation and fee structure right now is sustainable. But again, it's I think we have to be sensitive to that, and certainly sensitive to our current economic situation.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to make a comment here too. I was involved in the update or the information sharing, I guess, with Stephen and Ruth and Commissioner Willie and Chris Defaba, I believe. And one of the issues I have is the issue of cost recovery, and I'm hoping that that's something that we can be looking at as we go through our strategic planning process and see what we've done historically, what do we want to do into the future. And I understand that our general fund isn't such that we can just say, oh, gee, we're not going to do it that way, we're going to do it this way. So I get that as well. But I do think, aside from whatever path is taken, if it's to go to 5% right now, if it's 2.5 now and 2.5 additional in January, or waiting 6 months, I feel pretty strongly that one thing that we do need to do is to educate our mayors, our folks in the community about the differences between our fee structure and how our fee structure is, how we support our staff that is doing the job and where the money comes from to have those staff people here, and how that differs from the cities. So I would ask for that piece.
This is the only department that's based on cost recovery. Is that true?
That's actually not true. We have a lot of departments that base different fees. It's actually each fee is a little bit different. It's either mandated by ORS or it's based on cost recovery, and we do have some fees that's compared to the market kind of basis as well. So.
And Jack, could I ask a question along that line? Are there departments that have this kind of direct correlation with how municipalities do their work, where we're put into a situation where, you know, people are comparing, but it's really apples to oranges that they're comparing? Yeah. There are. It's not just in land use and transportation.
Correct. It's not just in land use and transportation, okay. If I understand your question
correctly. Well, I personally think we should monitor this, and maybe we're in very unusual circumstances and see what the economy does. But cost recovery is cost recovery. We have a business to run in the sense that we have to at least recover those costs. I'm not unmindful. On the other hand, to sort of use a parallel argument, I'm not unmindful of how that looks and how challenging that can be for people right now.
So I've asked Stephen in our meeting what the revenue impact of the 5% increase is, and obviously, and is it in the budget? And yes, it's in the budget already, and so I'll let him respond to the revenue impact and maybe what we'd look like if we went into this with baby steps versus the whole leap. So.
Hang on one second. Commissioner Rogers, let's give you an opportunity to come into this conversation before we turn it over to staff and further discussion.
Thank you. I generally agree with Commissioner Willey's comments. We had this conversation regarding the TDT, and all of the cities voted in favor of deferring that, and this board was not of a mind to do that. And so we're having a similar conversation. I sort of parse it, though. There are DA fees and HHS fees that probably should increase, and they're not, to me, the issue here. But I was hearing Commissioner Willey, and he might elaborate, but I was hearing him talking about the LUT. And the only way we can get this economy jump-started is to be a little more reserved with our increases so we can get that industry going, as well as the optics are just really not very good at this point. So that's my general comments.
I'll hold my remarks for the time being. I think you've been asked several different questions, so let's turn it back to you to give a fuller explanation of how the financing works through the current model, to what degree we have any reserves to accommodate any flexibility, and just a general description of how it works, why it works, or how long it's been set up, and so forth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Stephen Roberts, Director of Land Use and Transportation. So we're proposing, and there's a little bit of nuance into the proposed fee increases, so maybe I could just step through that very briefly. So in both building and current planning, which are enterprise funds, we're proposing 5% across the board increases, so that would be essentially everything on the fee schedule just sees a 5% increase. In addition to that, in current planning, we are also proposing some additional targeted fee increases that are driven both as a combination of better achieving cost recovery, or in one particular case, we are proposing to increase type 2 development review fees by 10%, and that would effectively create a pool of funds that would help us to bear the cost of land use appeals for type 2 decisions, which are statutorily limited to $250, but cost us thousands or tens of thousands of dollars, depending on the complexity of the situation and how far something gets appealed. So that that essentially creates a kind of insurance pool, if you will, right, to help us offset some of those costs. There are some other relatively minor changes that I won't dwell on here, but those are the two key things that we're looking at in current planning. So the practice of having current planning and building fee supported goes back really, as I understand it, back to the County 2000 plan from 1986, which the idea was that for services that benefit generally the unincorporated parts of the county, that those should be primarily fee supported. Current planning does receive $300,000 per year that goes toward code enforcement. And so that's kind of a general function that we do receive a little bit of, I believe, video lottery funding for. And then the rest of our current planning budget is made up of the fees that we recoup for our services. To your question, Chair, I think you had asked about fund balance, and I think we briefed Commissioners Willie and Treese yesterday. So we have a little bit of a cushion in terms of our fund balance. So if we were to potentially delay the increases or to phase them in a different way, we have a little bit of a cushion where we can accommodate that. However, the cushion is increasingly small. We are not currently recovering our costs through our fees, and so we are essentially losing money each month, and that's been going on for a little while now. And one of the reasons that we obviously keep a fund balance is to help accommodate, the economy is cyclical, development cyclical, and so we understand that there's a need to have that flexibility. I would say we've done quite a bit, I think, on the expenditure side in terms of controlling our costs. We are operating at what I would say is a fairly minimal staffing level right now. So we've done quite a bit to try to minimize just the staff costs, which is by far the biggest cost for both of those work groups, actually. I think the thing that's been bedeviling us a little bit is the fees or the things that we don't control. So things like appeals. We are seeing a number of appeals. So again, we don't control the cost of those, and we can't recoup our costs currently. And then I think we're just seeing sort of a general difference in our development types. So we used to have larger developments that had higher fees associated that helped subsidize perhaps some of the smaller developments that have lower fees. So while our overall target is cost recovery on certain fees, we may actually charge more than we need, and on some fees we charge less than we really need to actually get at cost recovery. So we're also trying to balance the cost recovery concept with the idea that the application fees should bear some relative proportionality to the application itself, the value of the development or some other aspect of that. So we're trying not to be unreasonable in either direction. So it puts us in a difficult position, but I was telling Commissioner Willie and Commissioner Treese, we certainly understand the timing of this couldn't be worse, but we were in the midst, certainly in current planning, of a kind of a 3-year phased increase. We were proposing 5% per year for 3 years. This would have been year 2 of that 3-year strategy. When the budget was developed, we were pre-COVID. So, this has taken us all off guard. And maybe I've said enough now.
And it's worth to note that if you look at the current planning's proposed budget for 2021, they actually reduced the entire budget by 11%, and that is with the fee increases that's in there. So right. I can definitely see that the business case in the fee increase.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, you didn't ask for any new positions or a half a position or something. Is that correct?
Across the entire department, we're essentially flat. In current planning, we're actually eliminating, I want to say, 4 vacant positions that we had been carrying in the budget. We just realized it's not going to be practical to fill those, so we're going ahead and eliminating those. And then I believe we're also eliminating 7 vacant positions in building services as well for that same reason.
Mm-hmm. So headcount's going to stay the same, but we just eliminated opportunities to grow and opportunities to add staff.
Correct.
We just eliminated that.
That's correct.
Okay, in that, all right.
Yep.
But with that FTA change, you're still meeting the recommended timeframes and everything for the permitting process, correct?
Yes, generally so, yeah. And that's another issue as well. So in current planning, we do have state mandated timeframes to issue our land use decisions, 120 days in the urban areas, 150 in the rural. And we're meeting those targets, but we typically just barely meet them.
And if we didn't do this work, if we didn't have the staff on board to do this work, we would have to find a way to contract with adjoining cities to do this work. And they would expect us to support a fee schedule that is cost recovery. So as you said, the strategy that has been put in place, year 2 of a 3-year strategy, is a softer landing for that cost recovery than we would have if we'd instituted it all at once.
Correct.
So in a way, this is, we've kicked the can down the road a little bit. We're just reducing the impact of it over the course of time.
Yeah, and we're certainly sympathetic to the concern about raising fees in the current economy. We understand that.
Yep. And as I've listened to economists over these last several weeks during this COVID time, and I don't know what we'll call this recession in the end, they keep talking about how we have very much a consumer-driven economy, and local government doesn't have the kind of tools needed to stimulate the economy. One of the things that we heard from the leadership of the state legislature rather early when we were asking for help during this time, they were saying, look, the reason you're not seeing the state catastrophic disaster legislation is that the way disaster system works is the state legislature lags and all. We're the last resource that you should be looking towards. And in a way, that's what's happening here too with regard to economic recovery. That said, it's impossible to not be mindful of the environment that we all function in. But we don't have real alternatives. The work still has to get done, as you say, per the state mandates. And if we didn't have the staff to do this work, then we would have to contract it out to our local jurisdictions. As saying all of this, I'm also mindful of the fact that both Commissioner Schouten and Commissioner Rogers were on the commission during the time of the Great Recession. And building was quite slow during that time. And, it was a multi-year recovery. And the board, my recollection, is that the board was really hard-pressed to navigate its way through, and if I recall, had to lay off staff during that time. And yeah, and so Mr. Roberts, you're shaking your head yes. And so I'm hoping that we can avoid that. And if we're not going to institute fee increases for cost recovery, then we really don't have many other tools than letting people go. But in the end, we still have state mandates. So if we're going to stay in the business, we have to fund ourselves to do the required business. Otherwise, we have to take perhaps more drastic measures, and I'm hoping we can avoid those. So it's a tough situation to navigate through, but we have to navigate through it.
Well, and of course, we all know this, but I'll just say the obvious, that this is more challenging than it was 10 years ago, because 10 years ago, this was a somewhat gradual decline. I mean, it became steep, but it wasn't like, we didn't just fall off a cliff and go from a booming economy to 14, 50% unemployment or worse in the space of couple of months. This is remarkable. We've seen nothing like it, not even in the Great Depression days in the 30s. So it's harder than it was 10 years ago.
Thank you for that context. Commissioner Rogers, do you have anything else you want to add or ask?
No, I don't think so. During the last recessionary period, your recollection is pretty accurate. We made some tough decisions that I think were right at the time. We may need to make some tough decisions now, but I don't think a 6 month change is going to do a lot. If we have to reevaluate it, we can do that at another time. But I like Commissioner Willey's proposal. So that's all I have to add.
Actually, I tossed out two proposals. One was incrementally 2.5% July 1, 2.5% January 1, and the other one was to delay the entire increase until January 1. So I'd be more inclined to 2.5 and 2.5, I guess, because I realize that we have some issues with this, but I also realize that so does the economy, and so yeah, I am not in support of a 5% increase July 1.
And maybe a clarification question. So on some of the fees, we also had those additional increases. So I'm assuming we would just sort of say half now, half later if the board were to move forward with that proposal.
Well, I'm just thinking about that because as you've indicated the other day, we look at the schedule of all this and there's a whole bunch of yellow in there. Mm-hmm. And so it's kind of hard to say, well, okay, we're gonna allow these fee increases, but these that are 5%, we're gonna limit to 2.5%. But I can't throw a blanket on the whole thing and say, no, that just works for everything. So I don't know how you would propose we work through that, but so
Yeah,
do you have an idea?
Well, my thought was, in some cases, the fee, the cumulative increase for a particular application type may be 15%. So we effectively say 7.5 now, 7.5 later. If it's a 5% increase, it's 2.5 now, 2.5 later. So essentially, you just do half the increase now and half the increase later.
Do half of it now for 6 months and then do the remainder of it in 6 more months.
Correct. Yeah, I think that would be consistent with Commissioner Willey's idea of sort of half the 5% now, half the 5%. So we would just say half of whatever the increase was now, half in January.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Generally, I would agree with that. And I need to go back and look at the schedule of recommended fee increases to make sure that I understand that and I'm communicating the correct message.
And be happy to walk through that with you anytime.
Well, and also I would want to understand what is the impact in terms of the budget, and are there the reserves to still keep the staff on board and doing the work at this level or not?
Yeah, I think with a proposal like what the commissioner has laid out, I think that certainly reduces the overall net effect of the reduced revenues. And I think we'd be in a much better position to absorb that in the coming budget year than we would if we were to just say no increase for the entire year.
And then also, I want to make sure that it achieves the goal for the direction on the total 3 years, or if we just elongated that model or not. So we have to, those loose ends have to be tied up so we know what the impacts are in changing the direction.
Just as I said, I think we're in a position to be able to, I think, accommodate a proposal like that. Certainly causes less concern than just saying a no increase or even a complete 6-month deferral.
I do have one more question.
Go ahead.
I do have one more question, and that's, Jack, during the budgetary process, there were some questions asked. Can you build a budget based upon projections? Any CPA does. And some of the things that we didn't take into consideration, obviously, was the reoccurrence of COVID. If that springs back on us, we don't know what the economy might look like. If things ramp up differently than we anticipate them, meaning that the recovery is not until at least maybe the third quarter of our fiscal year, which would be January of 21. The state sued on the O&C grant, timber issue and lost, and there may be some cuts, as I mentioned. PERS may have some adjustments based on a number of things. All of those things are sort of concerning, and so I like where people are going, 2.5 now, but to say that there's an automatic 2.5, we don't know what we might be facing in 6 months. I mean, we may be facing an economy that's even worse than it is today. So would you comment a little bit on your budget, how you prepared that, and some of the things that we maybe didn't take into consideration in your projections?
Yes.
Well, so what you may recall when we had our budget committee meeting a couple of weeks ago, we recognized that we already have cuts expected coming for community corrections and behavioral health and intellectual and developmental disabilities, because the state legislature and the e-boards did not release those funds as we were hoping and expecting before the end of the fiscal year. We did get the state revenue forecast on May 20th, which was a couple of days after our last budget meeting, if I'm remembering the calendar correctly. So we have a better indication of where the state is heading in terms of budget cuts, but the state legislature and the governor's office is still working through those. We're expecting to have a more firm state revenue forecast in September. But you are correct in understanding that we're bracing for increased risk. And so in some aspects of our work, we may have to cut community services in health and human services, community corrections, juvenile justice, as a result of those expected state forecast. So whereas for these LUT services, we may be able to damper the increased fee. Pretty soon we're heading into a more dire budget circumstance than we are pretty close to adopting as our proposed budget. So it's only going to get uglier from here, or potentially uglier from here, is the bottom line. I don't know. I'm looking at both our CAO as well as our Chief Financial Officer to see if my summary was on track or if it needs correction.
No, that's correct, and that's why we're suggesting in 2 to 3 months we will revisit the budget and review it in light of all the information we expect to have by that time.
I agree with that. So it sounds like the direction we're hearing from the board is that we'll do, for the fee schedule that's to be adopted in 2 weeks, we'll come back with the revised LUT fees with half of the increase.
For 6 months.
For 6 months.
The second half in the second 6 months. But also, before I'm ready to vote yes on that, I also want to know what the impact is to the LUT reserves for it, to see if we can afford to implement this 2.5.
Will do. Okay, we'll work with the LUT to prepare that information before the next board adoption.
Are there any other questions from commissioners on this?
Consultants to do this work as well, and that could be more expensive.
Commissioner Rogers, anything else?
I don't think so. I just maybe add one little caveat. If we're going to come back in 3 months, who knows? Maybe we'll even increase them more than 2.5. We don't know what the economy. That's the scary thing right now. We really don't know.
Well, I can just say from my standpoint, I'm willing to move forward with a fiscal year proposal of 2.5 for 6 months, 2.5 the remainder for the second 6 months, but not open-ended.
What do you mean by not open-ended?
Just wait and see how the next 6 months go. Rather give folks something that is clear for them to budget and plan in their operations, or to think that we're going to be out of the woods in 6 months.
Thank you. Just to clarify, it's, with a with half of the increase that you will be adopting in 2 weeks. And then if we were to come back mid-year to revise the fee schedule, you will still have another opportunity to decide to adopt the amendment by then as well. But it's really great for staff to have that direction to do planning work in between. Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate the time yesterday to giving us that update.
And I do as well.
All righty, so our last item for today is the House District 33 appointment update. And this is going to be presented by Sia Lindstrom, our interim assistant county administrator, and our clerk to the board, Kevin Moss.
So this is Sia Lindstrom with the County Administrative Office. I'm just going to give a quick introduction to Kevin here, who has stepped down from his seat as clerk so that he can provide this update to you all. For our listening audience, just a little context. Longtime state representative Mitch Greenlick passed away recently. That triggers a process to appoint someone to that vacancy. That involves both Washington and Multnomah counties. The Secretary of State has asked our Chair Catherine Harrington, to chair that process. And we are also very lucky to have a new board clerk who has significant experience with these processes. He has seen jurisdictions through these several times. So there are a number of decision points that he's bringing to you all today for this process. So I think he's going to walk us through the process and then touch base about those decision points. And with that, I will turn it over to Kevin. I will also let you know that Alan Rapelier is the other part of our three-part staff team to support you all through this right now. Kevin.
Thank you, Sia. Thank you, Chair Harrington, commissioners. So before you include in your packet is a proposed agenda for your adoption, as well as the notice that we received from the Secretary of State's office laying out the process. We are looking by Friday, June 5th, the State Democratic Party has until 5 p.m. to submit 3 to 5 nominees to the Secretary of State's office, and they in turn will provide a revised notice to the counties for adoption to host their meetings. So we are looking at hosting this meeting per the agenda on next Friday, June 12th at 2 p.m. using the auditorium as the physical space here, as well as making the meeting available by Zoom for the public and the nominees. So in the agenda, we're looking at giving the commissioners options of the 2 counties, Multnomah, Washington, to provide 6 questions. Are presuming that you would each ask 3 each, and we want to get your clarification of Are you satisfied asking 6 questions with the option of giving any commissioner the opportunity to ask any more? And how would you like to, as Washington County, develop your questions?
I'm going to be kind of blunt here. I don't really want to spend a lot of time on this because I think the choice is pretty obvious. I think my recollection is that all 4 of the candidates that were running for that position had all stated a willingness to fill in, and that I think, unless I've heard otherwise, that still continues to be true for the person who won in the primary. And so for me personally, the choice is very clear, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time on questions. I think this is an opportunity for that person to get a head start, which is actually wonderful for them and for the district. Give them an opportunity to introduce legislation and write legislation early rather than coming flat-footed at the start of the long session. And just as a little piece of me that just has to think that as commendable and as an utterly dedicated public servant that Mitch Greenbank was, that I think somehow that he was going to at least stay in office long enough where we could be in a position to make the obvious choice rather than having to really be stuck with more difficult choices if we'd had to do that months ago. So that's just me. I'm just going to there. So.
Commissioner Treese?
First of all, I concur with Commissioner Schouten, but my question is to you, Mr. Moss. Does you said the Democratic Party comes back with 3 to 5 nominees. Are they mandated to come back with 3?
They are mandated to come back with at least 3.
Oh, okay.
But,
thank you.
I'd make a comment as well. Dick and I, we were commiserating. We've probably been through, 10 of these over our time, if not more. And what we've seen, to Commissioner Treese's comment, probably the worst one was down in my area where it was a Republican nominee, and all 3 of them were there. 2 of them deferred to the first one and said they're the best candidate. And in this case, I agree with Dick. We've got a good person who's going to come into office in just a few months after that. It's a very short period of time. I know we got to play the process, but I'm not sure that it serves the public well at all to pick anybody but the person who won the election will be sitting there in January anyway. So 6 questions. I'm fine with the chair asking 2 or 3.
I'm not, but I'll speak after Commissioner Treese.
I'm just clarifying that we can't shortcut this process, and I think that's the most important piece, is that we need to follow the process, go through this, and plus we have our sister county, Multnomah County, that will be engaged in this process as well, correct?
Yes, but I think what Commissioner Schouten and Commissioner Rogers are pointing out is right now the proposed agenda has each nominee providing an opening statement, and then there being commissioner questions. We can simplify it, merely take the person who won the primary, have that person speak. We can decide here as a commission, do we want to ask any questions at all or whatnot, and go from there. I think the recommendation is don't belabor the point. The choice seems obvious, which is why I was giving my response about asking questions, because what I thought at most we would want to do, in addition to giving the person who won the primary the opportunity to provide the opening and closing statement, is this district, House District 33, within Washington County spans our 2 district areas. And so I wanted to ask you, are there any particular questions, because you may be asked by constituents what went into your thinking in this appointment. And so I want to make sure that to the degree that you want or interested, that you have the opportunity to ask one or more questions, should you decide you want to.
Do I have to answer that right now? Because I'm thinking that I would like to ask a question because of the constituent nature here, but it would be a short question. It's not, like, I agree with the end result. It's more giving the individual a chance to expound upon perhaps one particular issue for her district.
I want to be clear. I was just speaking for myself. If other people want to ask a whole list of questions, that's their call. I don't really plan to do that myself for the reasons I've already stated. And no one's proposing that we shortchange. There's a statutory process that the Democratic Party has to provide with 3 candidates, but Commissioner Rogers and I have seen how that it can be effectively shortchanged or short-circuited by the party. They simply come up with 2 candidates who will say, well, I think that so-and-so is actually by far the most qualified. I'm here because I have to be here, but don't vote for me, almost. It's kind of what they say. I don't really want the job. And the other part of it is I'm just thinking in terms of sensitivity towards, that was one of the toughest legislative races there was. 4 really great candidates, and they worked for well over a year. And then 3 of them have to accept the bitter reality that they don't get to do something they had worked well in excess of a year to do. So I don't really want to open up wounds that are still pretty fresh on that regard. So that's another piece of it. I mean,
So, Commissioners, there's no state mandate that you have to ask any questions, so we could revise this as just to give Commissioners an option to ask questions, if you so chose.
So the question I wanted to pose particularly to Commissioner Treese was, I'm interested in hearing from this person, this presumed representative, I guess, or not even quite representative-elect. I don't know what phrase to use. Yes. But anyway.
Presumed heir, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know.
2 things. One is, what are some of the things that this individual learned through the course of the campaign that she'll be carrying forward that maybe she did or didn't anticipate? And then secondly, is there anything about Washington County itself, the agency needs or whatnot, that she may have for questions of us? Knowing, I did have a phone conversation with Maxine Dexter, the winner of the primary race. She contacted me to ask questions about the process and so forth. So I had checked with Kevin on that and wanted her to just feel comfortable to know that we have a great team in our government relations team, and that they and we have a vested interest in, no matter who is selected, in making sure that they're well prepared and have the benefit of information about our legislative agenda and our needs. So, no need to think that it's going to be as arduous as the last several months have been on the campaign trail.
And actually, this gives them and us an opportunity to work some legislative stuff in these coming months that they would otherwise not really be able to do for us if they were to be coming in at the start of next year.
I also think that it's fair to demonstrate the expectation that there is a working relationship between the representatives, the senators, and the commission. And you've demonstrated that by having the meetings that we have. And I want to make sure that that's understood and that we would expect participation as well.
But frankly, I don't have a need to see these questions be asked of everyone that's on the slate.
That is certainly your prerogative, Chair Harrington and Commissioners. It is, the process and procedure is completely up to you. So would you like me to also revise the nominees' opening statement, closing statement to just introduce the nominees with brief remarks and scratch the closing arguments portion from the agenda?
No, I wouldn't scratch the closing part. They might not take the full 2 minutes.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. Any other questions or additions to the agenda or the process in general?
I would just suggest that we propose that at most we ask 3 questions instead of a full slate of 6 as a commission. Just keep it short.
Yeah. And I don't see why we'd have any objection from Multnomah. I've been speaking with Justin Black over there, Chair Kafori's government relations person, and he is on our same page of make the process simple, transparent, and easy to go.
And we haven't maybe been explicit about this, but I mean, I think that kind of decision-making just reflects the fact that we're furthering what the voters intended. I mean, the voters decided, and I think we should follow.
So do you have the system set up so that we just do voice votes and then you do the applicable multiplication?
Yes, Madam Chair. We will receive the document from the Secretary of State's office with the calculation, so all the commissioners will have to do is voice who their selection is, and I will take care of the rest for you.
Great.
And it is a roll call vote.
Correct.
Great. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Moss, and thank you. I'm pleased that you've had this experience and can help us through this as well. So even though we've had many of you with previous experience, it's nice to have you as part of the staff.
Thank you, Commissioner
Will
Treese.
this is a public meeting, so will we be hosting it on Zoom?
Yes, we will. So I will speak with Mr. Black this afternoon and create a Zoom link so we can publish it on both of our websites.
You know, the other thing that's nice about this is that we're not in a position of taking a vote on a candidate who, let's say we have candidate X and Y, and some of us, let's say on this end of the county, vote for candidate X, and actually candidate Y is the one that ends up, prevailing. Then we have the awkward situation of having voted for someone who, or voting against someone that we have to work with subsequently. And I'll just speak for myself. I think the last time we had a choice, I did not choose now Majority Leader Rob Wagner, and that can just be awkward. So this all is avoided, which is great.
If I could ask my colleagues one other question. The Multnomah County Commission does not have in-person meetings like we do, have the opportunity of, right? We're a hybrid. So for that commission, they'll all be coming in from their respective Zoom sites. Do we want to just make this 100% Zoom meeting? We don't need to have.
So the direction from the Secretary of State's office is we still have to have a physical space for public comment. That doesn't mean that the commissioners have to be in that space. So you can be in Zoom and I can run the meeting from here and provide if there's any members of the public or nominees here.
Well, also because of the unusual timing in the middle of the afternoon on a Friday in June, I'm more than happy for us to say, if you want, to have all the Washington County commissioners do Zoom as well. Right? No peer pressure at all on travel.
Yeah, and in my particular case, without going into a long story, we're going to be spending a couple of nights at the Grand Lodge at the end of the week in Forest Grove. So Hillsborough was really not hardship for me to personally, physically attend. And this has come up in the past too, because some years ago when we had to make an appointment that led to Debbie Boone being the new state representative for the North Coast area, which included a piece of Washington County. Our fractional piece was so small that while we didn't have Zoom then, we did it by phone. there were 3 or 4 of us in upstairs conference, and we took our votes and deliberated over the phone, where the hearing itself was heard in Tillamook County, I think, it was on the coast someplace.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Scott. We experienced this in my previous employment with Clackamas County with House District 52, where we had all of Hood River County Commissioners on the phone, so they didn't have to make the long track through Multnomah
Right.
to Clackamas County.
Yeah, because there could be some real distances involved.
It's an option.
Thank you.
Right.
Anything else from anyone? Commissioner Rogers?
Nope, not at all. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Do
you,
have everything
Commissioners.
you need?
I do.
Great. Is there anything else for today? Seeing none, our work session of Tuesday, June 2nd, 2020 is hereby adjourned. It'll be July 4th before we know it.
Yeah.